Hello, everyone. This is Peter Deswood from 21st Century Native Leaders Podcast. I am here with Jason Allison. Jason is the Chief Executive Officer of DreamCatcher Financial Strategies. Jason and his staff help Native people create financial needs analysis. They help establish college savings plans, rollover 401k plans, annuities, life insurance. They help with debt management, also wealth management. They help people with look at tax advantages as far as savings. Also, they help with expense plans and individual retirement accounts. Thank you for joining me, Jason.
Oh, absolutely. Good afternoon, Peter.
Absolutely. So, just to start out, I did sit through with a friend of ours a week ago. Jason and I had a conversation, and he was actually my wife and I are looking to get some financial advice. It's always good to have a professional and an expert take a look at your finances. So I sat through Jason's presentation, and it was pretty powerful. It's so powerful that I wanted to have him talk with the listeners and followers that follow the podcast and my YouTube. So again, so just to start off, Jason, talk with me about your tribal affiliation and probably your clans and where you grew up.
Okay, awesome. First of all, thank you for having me on your podcast again. Um, my name is Jason Allison. Senjikin the Touching Bushichin, Tutsuni Dasha Kiani Dashanale. I grew up about half my life half my childhood anyway, was probably in Phoenix area, and the other half was on the res. So, like my mom was in college and my dad were in college. So, probably from 3 years old to about 7, 8, 9 years old, I was in the Phoenix area. But then my adolescence and teenage years, I was spent in the on the reservation in Fort Defiance, Arizona. So, I did go to school at graduated from Winter Rock High School, and I currently live in Ahwatukee, Arizona, Phoenix, with my wife, and I'm Navajo, so I'm 100% Diné. Those are my tribal affiliations and kind of a background of where I come from.
That's awesome. So I know during the presentation the other day you talked quite extensively about your wife. Do you want to talk a little bit about her as well? I think she's pretty significant in your business, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. My wife is actually the owner of our business. So Dreamcatcher Financial Strategies, we are regulated, or not regulated, but we are under the business regulatory of the Navajo Nation. And we are 51% owner, or she is the 51% owner of our business. So, for it makes us a priority one business under the Navajo Nation, the laws. So we're really proud of that. 51% ownership belongs to my wife. So we are primarily a women-owned business, and I'm 49% owner. And we always joke because of what she always like, tell people that I own 51% of it. But that's really something we're absolutely proud of about our business. And she comes from an accounting background and HR background, so she's done some very impressive work with her benefits coordination, her HR profession, her expertise in that for some big major companies, both nationally, domestically, and foreign. So I'm having her in our business, and just my wife. It's just really strange how we came together and how we developed Dreamcatcher Financial Strategies. But she has a very extensive knowledge of what she does and her, with her expertise and her background.
That's awesome. I actually teach a class at Diné College, small business class, and I think that's one thing that's important is those strengths that you bring to the business as an asset to starting up a business, and that's pretty cool to hear. So, talk with me. You did mention a little bit about your education. Talk with me a little bit about how you and your wife came up with the idea to start Dreamcatcher Financial Strategies.
Okay, so a little bit about my I originally graduated high school with the intention of becoming a English teacher, a high school English teacher. So the first year of my college, I was totally what I was dedicated to, and I found out that I quickly lost interest in it. And I moved to Salt Lake City, Utah. I was going to the University of Utah there, and I met some friends, and I really got intrigued with with DJing because I was growing up, I was just totally into music the whole time. And I started down that career path of becoming a DJ, professional DJ. So I started DJing in all the radio stations. I did a very extensive career doing that. But fast forward to when I was 36 years old, that's kind of when the twilight of my DJ career was ending because for one thing I got really sick, so I got really ill, and when I got ill, it forced me to really look at my finances. It forced me and my family to really look at what we were lacking as far as finances. I didn't have emergency funds. I didn't have um, insurances. I didn't have anything in place. I was just sick and accumulating bills. So when that happened, I got better eventually, and then I started working for the casino. I got a job working for the casino, and I didn't want to. Everybody was congratulating me, saying, "Oh, you got a good job. It's a recession-proof business." But I didn't want to work there because the whole point of me working at a casino is to take people's money. That was my job. And along that time, me and my wife we started dating, and she was actually doing HR, and she was doing benefits for corporations, private contracts, and I didn't really understand what she was doing. I just knew that it was important. And then what happened was I got tired of the casino job. I didn't last long there. And the day I left, um, one of my friends, a friend of mine, said, "Let's go see this financial education thing." And I totally did not want to do it. I was just like, I don't want to. I don't care about it. I'm not going to be a millionaire someday. It was just my attitude was just that real. Just I don't care about it. I'm where I'm at. Where I'm at. I want to. I don't know. I'm too busy. Whatever. But she kept asking me, "Let's go, let's go." So I went to go see this presentation, and when I saw it, and I saw how those rules work, how tax implications work, how 401ks work, and the importance of having your financial house in order. And it just resonated so much with me because of what I went through in the sickness and then whatnot. And I talked to my wife about it, and she understood it. And that's kind of where the concept came of maybe we should educate our folks on what I just saw and what your expertise is. Because I can't imagine how many families out there suffer financial hardships just because of the lack of financial education, just the lack of financial concepts, of financial literacy. And that's when our idea came together, and we're like, we started down that path. Let's start a business where we're going to focus on financial literacy for Native Americans, everyday Native Americans, because it's an intimidating world if you're not involved with it directly. So we wanted to we really want to help our folks. That's where the passion came. She wanted to do that from her side and her expertise, and I wanted to start doing it from my side, and that's where we came together and we started down the path of Dreamcatcher Financial Strategies.
That's pretty interesting to hear that. I think one thing that's important is it took a life changing event for you to think about finances and take it more serious. Do you find that pretty common with your clients?
Yes, I do, and it's unfortunate sometimes when you have to go. Like a lot of my clients, they go through things that they should have prepared for. Like myself, I should have prepared for an emergency. I should have prepared, God forbid, something was to happen, and I didn't. It wasn't until after the fact that I thought I should have, would have, could have. Does that make sense? And I find that attitude is really spread out throughout native land. It's like I get clients that are like, "Oh, I'm healthy. Nothing's going to happen to me," or "Oh, I'm young. I'm only 30 years old, so I don't have to save for retirement." But then 40 years old, 45 years old creeps up on you. Then you're like 15, 20 years behind. And just kind of those attitudes that we have, and just priorities and accountability that we don't really take serious, and until something life changing happens. Does that make sense? I think coronavirus and the pandemic really exposed a lot of our folks when it came to that, because a lot of things happened on a global level, national level, all the way down to a local level, even within our Navajo communities. And I think it really exposed our where we're at, even on a government level. It just exposed a lot. So A lot of my clients that we set up 3, 4 years ago are just like, oh, we're so happy that we took this initiative and took your advice. And then some people come to me are like, hey, that thing you were talking about 2, 3 years ago, can we still do that? Because this is what we're going through. And it's like, it's too late now. We can still do something. We just can't do what we could have done then. Does that make sense? So, yeah.
Absolutely, that makes quite a bit of sense. Let me just share a little something, to add on to that. So in 2015, I lost my dad, right?
Mm,
And luckily, my mom had life insurance with her job. My dad had life insurance with the Navajo Nation. In addition, they had a third life insurance that when my dad passed away, my mom was, I think she had like 40 or 45,000 left on her mortgage. So she was able to pay that off. But I think that's one thing a lot of times, I know a lot of times in Navajo culture, they say don't think about death, or don't think about that time whenever you pass on into the next life or the next world. But I mean, I'll be honest with you, when me and my wife saw that happen, we both upped our insurance. I mean, not only just on us, but our kids as well. And that's it takes those type of events, those life events, to make you think about your finances. And I like that idea. So whenever you work with your clients, what do you find are some of the biggest challenges we Native people make with their finances?
there's quite a bit, to be honest with you, Peter. I think ultimately what it just comes down to is just people's attitude towards it. We have more out of, let's take 10 clients that I have. I'd say maybe two take it seriously. Like we really generally are inquiring. Other ones are kind of like we'll see what we have or what we want to do, but I don't have money to do this. I don't have money to do that. And I kid you not, I'll meet with clients when I talk about attitude and priorities. I kid you not, I'll meet like a 30-year-old who has a great job, no children, educated, but no retirement plan. And when I do this financial needs analysis, I say, "Hey, buddy, man, we gotta put something into place. But let's get you some funds going." And he comes at me and says, "I don't have enough money. I can't do that, Jason. I can't." And after I do the financial needs analysis, I'm like, "Okay, what do you do?" We find out where your money's coming in, where it's going, and I'm like, "Bro, you spend 12,000 a year going to concerts, in L.A., Albuquerque, Phoenix. Every time there's a festival coming out, you spend 12 grand. How about we do this? Let's cut that budget in half. Do 6 grand going to your concert, 6 grand into your retirement account per year." But it's just the priority is like, no, I'm good. I'm good. And um, fortunately, a couple years passed, and we set up that gentleman after his priorities changed. He has a whole mortgage now. He has a wife, and he has a children. So the Metallica concerts and those became less of the priority, and now his babies are in his home are the priority. So that life changing thing. But there's a lot of different attitudes that our native people are, and it's not our fault. It's just that we're not educated enough, or it's not too much in our talked about in our communities and our cultural taboos. Like you said, life insurance is something that's really they say it's taboo, but I don't think people really understand. What I come to find out is people don't really understand how life insurance works. A lot of people think, okay, life insurance is somebody passes away and somebody gets paid. That's just what it is. But really, realistically, there's so many different types of it. So many ways that you could use life insurance policies for children's savings, for retirements. There's a lot of tax advantages that come with it. It's just not that black or white thing anymore. There's a lot of gray in there. There's a lot of ways you could utilize it. I always compare life insurance to cell phones. All right. A cell phone was made to make calls, pick up calls, make calls, pick up calls. That's it. Communicate. But then this, the flip phone came out, and it's a little bit more compact, and you can start text messaging. So it's the same way. And then it evolved to the iPhone. Now people don't even use it to make calls anymore. It's texting, applications, listen to music, same way. But if you do need to make a call, you can. If you need to receive a call, you can. Life insurance is the same way. A lot of these retirement accounts are the same way. They used to be like that, and then it evolved. Today, you could use life insurance for all kinds of different things in your in your financial house, and it's just getting the word out there. That's the whole point. Is financial literacy, financial education. How can we utilize a lot of these things? Does that make sense? So,
Yes, that does. That makes actually quite a bit of sense. I think a lot of times, like you were saying, educating is a lot of the process in this. And I feel with my tax clients as well, I feel, for example, a pretty good number of them forget to have money withheld from their paycheck, right? That's a minor one. Or they could put money away in a 401k or a Roth IRA, but they just don't know how to do that. And I think that's where the educating is important because and I don't know if it's taboo, but it seems to be money is not necessarily or not really talked about in especially Navajo culture. I'm not going to say Native culture, but I know in Navajo culture, it's we just don't talk about it. It's just one of those conversations that you have like with with people passing away. But I mean, if you think about that, I know you kind of mentioned this a bit, but what do you think prevents natives from putting money away and setting aside and looking to the future?
I think there's so many different factors in that. That's a very loaded question. We could probably spend all day talking about that. It depends on a lot of things. Baby boomers look at their money differently than millennials. Um, Generation Xers like myself look at money differently than how their parents did. Across the board, though, I just think the lack of financial literacy and education is just it's spread out throughout Navajo land. It doesn't matter. I mean, I've even met with some of our leaders and leaders of other nations, and even they're not financially educated. I mean, it's just the whole lack of financial literacy in our communities. It doesn't exist. Does that make sense? I'm just trying to. We're trying to. We have our work cut out for us. That's the way I could put it. And we have this mentality. A lot of us have this paycheck to paycheck mentality. Make as much money as you can and spend it as quick as you can. We have a lot of people have that mentality too. And we have this gift giving, which is good too, but sometimes that could be very detrimental to your financial house. We're givers. We love to give, especially I see a lot of grandparents too who do that. They get their checks and they distribute it amongst their children or grandchildren. So there's a lot of different factors in there. I think what it comes down to is when we have these conversations with our clients, a lot of times it just comes down to accountability and discipline too. Because money is every time I sit with a family or a client, I always make them write something called Dear Money. And I want to see what their perspective is on it. So currency in our, it's a very new concept to Native American people because we were traders, we were barterers. So only within maybe the last three generations where currency and money and finances and taxes have come into play with our folks. Does that make sense? So I think there's just a lot of different factors, Peter. I don't know if I could just pinpoint it to one or two things. I think there's multiple things that we're lacking, but ultimately what it comes down to is just a lack of education, a lack of literacy, financial literacy. So
That's awesome. I like that. So, like you think about this, right? Your vision and mission of your business. What are you trying to do? I know you talk about educating, but what's your overall purpose and mission?
there's a few. That's a great question. I love that question. I think it seems like our goals change, our mission changes. Primarily, it's to educate folks. That's the main thing. And then once people get this education about how finances work, it's to take action. To take action. And I always think about like my community of Fort Defiance. If uh, if I was to get maybe a quarter, maybe a fourth of the people, the population there, to put money aside and save it, or put their children into savings plans, or put life insurance policies on their dependents, just a quarter of our population, say one family puts away $1 million in a life insurance policy, which is super affordable nowadays, and then they put a children's savings plan together when their babies are first born, and then maybe um, an IRA for their, for their parents or whatever. That one house, if we could do that to maybe even a quarter of our population of Fort Defiance, I can't even imagine what Fort Defiance would look like in 100 years. Does that make sense? Oh, there would be a lot of wealth that was built just by using these strategies that are very affordable, that are very simple, but it's just understanding what and how. And a lot of people get intimidated by it, and that's what we want to do. Is that not, we just want to sit with our folks and educate our folks on how these things work, and this is what's out there, and how can we get started, basically. So that's the couple missions is let's create some generational wealth for our Native American folks, not just on Navajo, but throughout the whole nation. Does that make sense? Every tribal nation, let's build some wealth somehow, some way for our future generations and even for our elderly. So that's one of the missions. The other one's just it starts with the financial education.
Nice. I like that. So you mentioned something in what you just said about generational wealth. A couple of years ago, I read a book called The Color of Law, and in that book, it talks a lot about generational wealth is created with people owning houses, owning property. Do you see that as a barrier, especially with natives that live on reservations or reserves, trust land? I know, like, my wife and I, we have a mortgage on our house, so we're building equity, right? We're building equity with what we're doing, as opposed to renting. But like, how do you navigate that dynamic with your clients?
It depends. Our reservation clients, because it's lease land that they're going to have to build on. So the way the equity looks at there is very different from owning your real estate in a city. And I don't know, but honestly, like myself, I'm an advocate for these other strategies rather than real estate because unless you really know what you're doing, that's not really my forte or my expertise. But when we help our clients, if the goal is to own a home, and we've done this many times, we've had to put strategies in there, whether it's off the reservation or on the reservation, and we've helped clients all through it. And I think ultimately, like owning a home culturally, for me personally, is something that's really important. Um, you know, having land, even if it is leased land on the reservation, and having a place that you can conduct prayers or you can conduct, have your children run around. I think about my mom's house. That's why we retreat back. That's home always, no matter all of her children have our own homes, but that's still home. And from a finance perspective, it just depends again on the client's goals. It depends on where they're at in life and what their financial needs are. So I hope that answered your question.
No, that does. I mean, I think that's the thing that's important, is just helping people navigate that process, so they understand the benefits. I guess typically the cost benefit, right? Whenever they look at it and what they're doing, it's so interesting. My youngest, she's a 12-year-old, and yearly she sells steamed corn, dried steamed corn, is Gigi.
Hmm.
And whenever this year, she ended up making about $340. But I ended up taking that $300, and I created a stash account for her, and I put that money into a little account for her to watch it and to see what happens with money. And I think that's a lot of times I feel like that understanding, and like you were saying, you said within the last last 30 years or last three generations, Native people have been really understanding the importance of money and finances. But a lot of times, like, I don't remember my parents necessarily sitting down with me and having conversations about credit, having conversation about insurance, because they were just navigating that process as well, right? So I feel like that's one thing that's important, is teaching entrepreneurship, teaching about finances, and I think in the presentation that you had given the other day, you talked about time value of money. You talked about interest, and having interest work for you as opposed to having interest work for the bank, right? So I mean, if you think about those concepts, like What are some of the things that you talk about with your clients and building wealth?
Okay, I talk about a couple different things. And just kind of, you kind of triggered me to think about something that I mentioned. Sometimes I mention this in my presentations about the timing of our knowledge of finances, meaning us Native Americans. So sometimes I talked about this in my presentation. I say, how far behind are we as far as financial literacy, financial education, understanding these concepts? And one thing that was very enlightening to me was when I got married to my wife. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So when I was getting married to her, in my family, we're traditional and we're Native American church, so that's how I grew up. I grew up using medicine, and that was my family dynamics as far as tradition and culture and religion, I guess. My wife's family is very Christian, so they're a very Christian family. Um, so when we came together, what happened was we got married in her church. But in order to get married in her church, I had to do, well, both of us, we had to do counseling with her pastor. And I was totally open minded about this. And when we did counseling with the pastor, what happened was he he goes, I want to talk to you guys about finances as it relates to you and your marriage and as it relates to your business. And he goes, I'm going to talk about the Bible. And he was like, Jason, I know you're traditional. So you probably don't really know, but I want to ask you, do you know who Jesus is? And I said, yeah, of course I know who Jesus is. Then he asked me, did you know who his top 12 disciples were in the Bible? And I said, I don't know too much about it. I said, but I do know the 12 disciples and Jesus. And he goes, well, did you know one of his 12 disciples was a financial advisor? He was a tax person. His name was Matthew. And he would start talking to me about it. And I was so fascinated. I was like, I did not know that. I had no clue that story. So I was thinking, okay, we got married, and then we sat in a ceremonial setting, me and my wife, and this it was on New Year's Eve. And my uncle goes, "All right, so we're going into the new year, but do you know what the new year represents? 2017 going into 2018. That was the year." And he goes, "What that means is 2017 is the years after this man named Jesus. That's what that means. They call it AD. Before that was called BC. So that's what that means. So we're celebrating another year after the life of this man." And I was thinking about what the pastor said. So I'm thinking, like, you know what? As it relates to finance, I'm looking at my mother, and I'm like, my mom taught me what she knew about finances. Okay. My grandma taught her what she knows about finances. But my great great grandma, my great great grandpa, and I remember them, they were farmers. They lived off the land. They had sheep. They had cattle. So as it relates to finances, that means in our family, it's only 3 generations deep. Does that make sense? And then I'm thinking about what the pastor said. He said Jesus had a tax man, financial advisor with him. And I'm thinking it's 2017 going to 2018 years ago. 2017, 2000 years ago. The concepts of taxes, finances, interest, and all of that was around. But in our family, it's only been around for at least 3 generations. That's how far behind we are when it comes to financial literacy. Does that make sense? So, like I said, when we're trying to educate our folks, we got to really understand that we don't, this concept of currency, finances, taxes, and all of this is very much out of our element. And we're still trying to learn. And going back to what you just said, I don't think I ever had a conversation with my mother and my father too about how to. Honestly, I don't. I love my mom and dad. Okay, I love them. The only conversation I can remember, though, going back, is how to get an application done for a student loan. Does that make sense? That's really it. That was and then I had to go to college, get broke, all of that to really learn about this until I got into this business that I'm into. So I'm thinking, like, when you're asking me the timeline of it, when we're meeting with clients, sometimes I tell that story just to kind of get a better understanding of how far behind we are as far as financial literacy. And does that make sense at all? What I'm just saying?
No, it makes total sense, and I think that's that component. I mean, you think about it, like you were saying, my great my ancestors were also farmers, and you were right. The currency, it was bartering. It was, I had, we planted corn and we traded corn or melons, and we had livestock as well, and we traded livestock. I mean, I remember going up to Cortez, Colorado, after raising cows and sheep and selling them. But I mean, you think about that though. I think there are some building blocks that are there as far as like entrepreneurship and
Absolutely.
understanding of money. But I think we just need to, I mean, I think because I think back and I remember my grandparents didn't have a lot of debt, right? They didn't have a lot of debt because they lived definitely below their means. I mean, and here's the thing: my dad had 12 or 13 siblings, and on my mom's side there were 9 siblings. So I mean, man, you really had to stretch those pennies with that many kids, right? But I mean, I get what you mean. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the level of entrepreneurism in our culture is very deep. And honestly, I think we lost some of that. Because when I think about my grandparents, they didn't have jobs. They were folks that, they did the same thing. They sold their cattle, they would prepare, there were seasons within their budgets and whatnot when it came. They transitioned well from that living off the land and that to finances. And then somewhere in between something happened. We lost that entrepreneurial spirit. A lot of us did. Um, and then and I always think about the timeline of it. Um, Baby boomers were born, and these new financial concepts all of a sudden were introduced to us. And our folks, education was the main thing. Education was the main thing. And then we're getting jobs, and the baby boomers. And I'm thinking about my parents, by the way. They're invested in 401ks. They're invested in bank accounts, savings accounts, and whatnot. And that was just, I can't even imagine what it was like for them back then. That was probably just a bomb of knowledge or a bomb of information that they didn't really understand. And they were like, sign here, get into this. But they didn't start understanding it until later on. And a lot of folks that we meet with who have these 401ks, they don't even know how they work. Does that make sense? And they teach their kids, sign up for a 401k or sign up for this or sign up for that. If your work has it, but they don't really know that financial strategies and financial concepts have evolved. They always evolve. Inflation, all these different things that we don't really understand, and that's what we're trying to do: just educate our folks on how to bring that spirit of owning it yourself. That's what we're also very big on. The entrepreneur spirit. There's just two different stories going on there. Educating, and then I'm a strong advocate for entrepreneurism too, especially for Native America. So,
Right. In fact, I think you pointed that out very clearly. My Che and my Nohusky, they and you're right. That generation. So my great grandparents, they lived off the land. They lived out in Lukachugay, Round Rock. Right. It wasn't until my Nolashki and my Che that they started mining. Right. My Che was a uranium miner, and my Nohusky was worked in the copper mines and the uranium mines. So I think it was that was the breakthrough was 3 generations or 2 generations ago. Actually, that'd be three. But I mean, it's interesting though, and it's fascinating to see how quickly though that Native people are improving, and but it's taken a lot of work, and I think part of the reason why the work is amazing is because whenever you were giving your presentation, you talked about predatory lenders and staying away from that and educating people. Can you talk with me a little bit about that?
absolutely. There's a part of my presentation where I talk about interests and if it works for you or against you. And I always ask that question when I'm presenting to a big crowd or even to somebody one on one. I said, when I ask the question, does interest work for you or against you as related to finance? And I always like on Zoom, I'll say like thumbs up if it's for you, thumbs down if it's against you. I'll get this sometimes, or I'll get this, but most of the time I get this. Does that make sense? So a few people will be like this. And it's like, well, you're all right. Everybody's correct. Interest can work for you or against you, depending on what you know and what you don't know. How can it work for you? You can make things like money markets work for you. You can make interest gaining accounts work for you. You can even make stock market accounts work for you. Index accounts work for you, interest wise. If you know how to place, if you know how to do that. But most of us don't know how to do that. What do? We go to the border towns. We go to Gallup, Farmington, Flagstaff, Page, or any border town in Native America. Every res has a border town, and it seems like they're very stocked up with predatory payday loan places, speedy loan places, and when our folks go there, they think I'm thinking about some of my relatives. They think these people are helping them. But come to find out, they have very high APRs, they have very high interest rates, and a lot of our folks are just drowned in debt when it comes to these predatory loans. And they are very much, they're the ones like, I'm not afraid to say, they're the ones that are going to just dazzle you up and, they'll make you feel like you're on top of the world, sign here. And that's what they do. And we had an office in Gallup, New Mexico, and we had our work cut out for us there. We were like, man, it's like us against 50, 30, 40 of them. And then not only that, one thing that I think is very prominent in our native lands, our native communities, or native border towns anyway, are pawn shops. So those kind of ways, interest can work against you. Does that make sense? And that's primarily what a lot of us know is how to really work the institutes that don't have the best interests at our heart. And no pun intended, but they give us our folks these really high interest rates, and it's just not a good thing. But it's just if we can find these things, let's find these things where it's on the positive, where it's gonna work for us. We can do that. So that's part of that presentation that I talk about too, and part of the financial literacy that we offer is like, let's look at your loans, let's look at this, and then we can help. We have a really good team that helps get our folks out of that in a very timely manner too, as well. So,
That's awesome. That's really good information. So, you think about the work that you're doing, right? And there's been an increase of natives being worried about finances. So, what are some trends you're seeing with the Generation Z folks?
Generation Z, those millennials, is that what we call millennials too?
Yeah, millennials, because I listen to a lot of economics and money podcasts, and they talk about millennials are different because one, they're not needing cars, they're Ubering it everywhere. That's just an example. Oh, another one is they're not buying houses because they're renting, things of that nature. Are you seeing any trends?
Absolutely, definitely. To me, it seems like the millennials are fast. They're faster. They're more progressive thinking too when it comes to their finances and their money. A lot of them are. We have a lot of millennial clients who are like, and I hear this more times than none. I don't want to do what my parents did. You know what I mean? Or even some of our per natives, they're like, I don't want to do what my parents did, which is, I guess, my generation X. And by all means, I agree with them. But they're the information generation. Everything's at a touch of a dial now. Everything's on a phone right now, on a computer. They can look up things and get information quick, and they can get educated quick too. Do you want to go Dave Ramsey style, or do you want to go Warren Buffett style? There's two totally different ways. You go to the term now, invest later, or you go to the indexing. Which one are you going to go to? And by all means, they're both good. But I'm just really glad that millennials are starting to take interest in that. They're seeing benefits of it, and it seems like just the education and being able to look things up at the touch of a dial, and or at a keyboard is making them quicker and faster. The trends that I'm seeing is that they care more than my generation did as relates to finances. I have some of my clients who are putting away half their paychecks into accounts for their retirements, and They are the renters. They are the penny pinchers. You know what I mean? They are the ones that I've come across anyway. So they're very money minded. They're very money minded. They're very conservative too. A lot of the Generation Z or millennials that are out there. And then of course we have the ones that are not. So they're the ones that are. It's like one extreme or the other. I wish there was a balance between all of them. Does that make sense? Are some of your podcasts and some of the things that you're listening kind of align with what I'm saying too?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's there's some stability in that, and I think they're saying that there's a good percentage of them investing in markets and understanding because, like you said, I can do Dash, I can do any app that I want to put money away. I can look at it and check it on my phone as opposed to going to a broker and avoiding those fees. But you're right. That's really good point that you just made.
And the difference between my generation too and the baby boomer generations are that this millennials, they want to own things on their own. They're very independent. Whereas baby boomers in my generation, they want to stay at a job for 20 years, 25 years. Like I talked to my little brother who's a millennial, and he's like, "Yeah, I plan to be there for 2 or 3 years, and then I'm gonna go look for something else." So therefore, I got to make sure I have a retirement plan that's not owned by my employer. What can you do for me? Like we are meeting those kind of folks where I'm going to own it independently, and I'm not going to depend on somebody else to facilitate my finances. And I think the millennials, I don't, like I said, a lot of them are looking information up, and you have a lot of them looking up these podcasts and whatnot. So their information generation's quick, and they have options. They look at all their different options and they figure out which one's the best one that's going to work for them. Whereas our generation is, and this is very, I'm even I'm guilty of this. Mom, Dad, what do I do? Sign up there at that 401k or sign up there for that savings account. It's going to be good for you in the future. Okay. Then you stay at that job. Don't leave it. It's good pay. Like these millennials, they don't think that way. They think differently. I want to do things as quick as I possibly can. I want to own it and I want to pay as minimal as I possibly can, but I want money to grow for me. So a lot of those trends are out there with our millennial generation. So I like it, to be honest.
That's awesome. That's good to hear. So, why would someone seek your services?
For a couple of reasons. First of all, I know we're the only Native American financial broker in this region. Um, my wife is the first financial service senior broker that's Native American. So we work with a lot of different companies out there. We work with our business style is the 2020 hybrid style of business. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is a lot of the business, the pandemic really contributed to this. That a lot of online or a lot of financial service business has shifted to online, to this, to Zoom, to podcasts like this, very quick. I could do it from the comfort of my own home. And it's kind of like how Amazon, how they distribute their services. It's a 2020 style of business. Uh, DoorDash, Uber, those kind of businesses shifted the economy and shifted the way people get their services. Now, when I look at, I live here in Awatuki, and I live on Chandler Boulevard. So when I drive down Chandler Boulevard, I see State Farms, Merrill Lynch's, Edward Jones, Fidelity, and they all have for rent signs on them now. Those are the Toys R Us, J.C. Penney, Kmart's of the financial industry. They're on their way out. Does that make sense? Because that Generation Z and the information generation is switching to this style of business now. It's switching to this hybrid style of business now. And with us, what makes us unique is that we're not loyal to any company. We're loyal to what our folks need because it's time to our interest isn't in what I can do for nationwide. My interest is in what I can do for Transamerica. My interest is in what I can do for any company. My interest is what can I do for my people. Does that make sense? What is Mr. Begay? What's Mr. Yazi? What's Mr. Vicente? What's their financial needs and their goal? All right, I know what they want to do. Stay patient with me. Me and my team are going to get to work. Nationwide, what can you do for them? Transamerica, what can you do for them? Such and such company, which one's the best? This is what they said, and I'm going to go out there and advocate for my folks. You know what I mean? And I'm going to set them up with the best possible plan because I'm loyal to my people, not to the company. And then when we deliver them policies and start seeing those accounts growing, we see them working, everything's in the positive. The best thing apart about it is when my clients say, "All right, Jason, how much is this going to charge me? Or how much are you going to charge me?" And you know what we say? Zero. We don't charge nothing. Does that make sense? We don't charge our folks anything for our services. Our dedication is to help our people prosper and to be financially literate and to get them into these strategies that are going to be beneficial for our folks. COVID-19 really exposed a lot of that, especially in the life insurance part of our business. A lot of people realize that something very scary, something very detrimental to our folks. It doesn't even discriminate that virus. We had really healthy people, and we had very, it ran rampant through our Navajo land. So our life insurance thing was like, our thing was like, man, people should be covered somehow, some way, at least for the time being. I think everybody should have life insurance, honestly, because you never know what's going to happen. And a lot of our folks don't, and this is part of that financial education part. A lot of folks don't realize that if you're a young 35-year-old or a young 40-year-old with a brand new family or grandchildren and you just started a mortgage and God forbid something happened to you, that debt doesn't go away. It's going to be inherited by your children, your wife, your parents, whoever. And it's just having that kind of financial protection is absolutely necessary. That's how I feel about life insurance. And I'm very a strong advocate for life insurance. But there's ways you can utilize them. Like I said, I know it's taboo, but I think COVID made us really realize that some of this stuff is real and some of these things we need. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, it does. And I like that you said that about those shops and strip malls because just this past spring, on my, I think I opened up a IRA on Charles Schwab for my wife and using the Acorn account, a IRA as well. But I mean, you think about that, it's just at the touch of your hands, right? So you know what? This made me think of something. I remember you talking about in your presentation about the bottle, the glass bottle, and looking through. And can you talk? Can you share that the audience? And because that was a pretty powerful story that you had told the glass
Oh,
bottle.
absolutely. I'm holding a water bottle right here. So I always say, like, there's a big account. It's like a glass tube account. That's what I call it. And what this glass tube account is all your money goes in it. And since it's glass, you can see inside of it. Like right now, you can see my hand, right? Imagine this is all your money right here, this water. Who could see it? Who's the eye in the sky that can always see what's going on in your accounts? What this money is right here is your Wells Fargo account, your 401k account. This is your equity, your mortgage, anything that has to do with finances. Anything that you put your social security number as it relates to money and finances goes into this glass tube account. So who do you think has eyes on it at all times? The IRS, Big Brother, Uncle Sam. I would say the IRS spells theirs, THEIRS spells theirs. So theirs can always see what's going on in your accounts, right? So that's the reason why I'm like, what happened to me? What happened to me was 2016 or 2014, I got sick. So what happened was I didn't have anything in place. I had no life insurance in place. I had no money saved. I was making good money, spending it, making good money, spending it. But when the sickness hit me, I was laid up in a hospital bed for 8 months. And all my income stopped. All my work stopped. But what didn't stop was my bills. They were piling up, piling up, piling up. So what happened was my mother had to dip into her 401k to help me out with my finances. So when she did that, she wasn't at a certain age. So the government basically taxed her and penalized her for helping me out with my medical emergency. And so she ended up getting a lot of money taken out of her accounts to help me with my or a family emergency. Fast forward a couple years later, um, her money it was still pretty good at that glass tube account. Now what happened was it dwindled. It was probably like right here, maybe about right here. And then she helped me with my family or my medical emergency, and it dropped. So she lost all of that. 2016 came, and my little brother said, "I'm gonna go back to college." And my mom said, "Well, son, I don't have the money I used to have because I took some out and I got dinged with penalties and taxes. So I'm over here now trying to rebuild my retirement. So I'm gonna have to fill out this thing called a FAFSA, and we're gonna ask the government for financial aid or Pell Grant." So what does the government do? They look at my mom's glass tube accounts. Okay, this is what you have, what you have. It looks like you still have enough to pay for your son's education. Not realizing that a big chunk of it went to medical bills for me, went to, expenses, and then the taxes and everything. But they looked at this and said, you can still do it. But realistically, my mom was broke. Does that make sense? So government says, we're looking into this, but we can't qualify you for Pell Grant or financial aid. But looking at your FAFSA, you're denied. We denied your son. But we will qualify him for something else. And you're going to have a little bit of interest on it. And that's what the student loan came. So um, they ended up approving my brother for a student loan when he was 22. I was 36 at that time. My mom was 51. Every single one of us were on some kind of road to debt. Does that make sense? Because we didn't understand these kind of rules and these kind of concepts. And that's one of the things that we really want to prevent is that happening to people. Like, understand how your 401k works. Understand that if you dip into it, understand the ages, understand the formalities of how it works, understand how a FAFSA works, how a student loan works. And that presentation you're talking about, I really encourage people to come to one of our seminars where I talk about that because it really breaks it down with visuals. So I kind of just gave you the quick gist of it. And I always ask people, can you relate to this? I don't got one person who said they can't. Everybody could relate to that story somehow, whether it's a student loan story, whether it's a dipping into a 401k story, whether it's a medical emergency story, whether it's, there's so many different financial um, emergencies that we end up in. And that's what we want to do is just educate our people, like understand these kind of things, understand how it works, understand what the strategies are out there to prevent those kind of things too as well.
Man, that's such a powerful story. I mean, I just learned some more just hearing you talk about that. And I'll be honest with you, that's why I wanted you on my podcast show because our people need to hear this. Our people need to be educated. I mean, I know, like you're saying, there are some that are educated, but there are some out there that don't know who to ask, where to start. And now we have a Navajo, priority 51% Native woman-owned business, and I'm going to start plugging you and sending people your way, including my clients. So, what is the best advice you have for Native people about finances?
It's just just understanding. I just can't say that enough. I know I'm being a broken record right now, but just know that there's hope, know that there's strategies out there that we don't know about. And that's our whole thing. We got a lot of work cut out for us because we're still very much on a grassroots level. Um, we're still very much on a social media level. I wish we could have the big billboards out there and say, "Hey, this is where we're at." But just getting the word out there that there's financial educators out there like yourself, like me, and then I know there's a couple other people, and just taking a genuine interest in it. Um, just taking a genuine interest in how to educate yourself financially. And I think it's going to be very powerful. Like me, I didn't want to go about it. I was one of those Generation Xers who didn't care about it. But when I saw that presentation, I dedicated my life to it. So I dedicated my life to educating our folks on how finances work, knowing these concepts, and then utilizing them, utilizing strategies. I always tell people when I do my presentations, in this country, we're able to do this. And the way I look at these concepts, financial concepts, whether it's taxes, retirement accounts, interest, any of these things, if we really could understand that, how better off can our communities be as a whole? All the way from our leadership level to our community level to our individual family level. Man, I think that would be so powerful. If we know how to be financially free, we really are free. Otherwise, we're not. You're not really free unless you're financially free. If you have the freedom of time and money is something that is kind of that's going to complement you, then that's great. But if we're living under the, under the how would you say it, the prison, under the, the community of debt, owing, living paycheck to paycheck, kind of being slaves to our bills and then what we owe and not really knowing, and we're not free. We're not free. We got to be financially free, and that's when I get a little passionate when I talk about, let's turn these concepts on let's turn these financial concepts around on itself, because a lot of this was meant to oppress us. A lot of this was meant to put us down, to hold us down. But if we can educate our folks, starting with our communities and whatnot, then we really can be financially free. It's actually doable. It's like, wow, we actually could do it. And like what I always love doing those children's policies, and I always tell these parents, thank you for doing this, because of that generation. In 100 years, I'll be long gone by then. But can you imagine if we get 10 families to do this, 20 families to do this, 50 families in our community to do this? What these children, this next generation is going to generate for family wealth and generational wealth? It's kind of like we become financial warriors. Like we declared financial warfare. Does that make sense? So that we're not in poverty all the time. We're not living with our handouts all the time. Like just being very independent on learning how to be financially free. And that's what our mission is, our crusade is, our movement. So that's what we're trying to really put out there, is that we're out here to help our folks.
Wow, man, it's really powerful to hear you talk about finances like that. Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I mean, well, you asked a lot of questions that were just right on point. And thank you very much, Peter, for allowing me to talk on these. Um, we do a financial seminar twice a week on Tuesday nights, 7 p.m. Mountain Standard, and then on Saturday mornings at 11 a.m. If you really want to see what I'm talking about in a very structured PowerPoint, the presentation that I do, I highly recommend you join one of those meetings. That's where you're going to see me talking about the glass tube accounts. You're going to see me talking about the interest and how to compound interest and how we could change this around for our Native folks in the communities. We do that every Tuesday and Saturday. We're on social media. I'm on social. Yeah, we're on social media. Our website's DreamCatcherFinancialStrategies.com. My phone number, I'll just say it right here, 480-415-5764. We just want to help everybody. We have a staff. We have a team that stretches from San Diego, California, all the way to Chicago. So most of us are here in the Valley, in the Southwest. We got a team in Albuquerque as well. But my goal is to put a licensed financial service professional agent in every Native American community throughout the whole U.S. We have a sister team in Canada who's doing the same thing, same vision, same everything. Their laws are a little bit different up there than us, but our Native team, they're Cree natives, and then there's some our folks up there. They're trying to do something with the First Nations people, the same thing we're trying to do here south of the border. So like I said, we're just really declaring financial warfare. We want our folks to all get out of this mentality and out of this paycheck to paycheck living, out of this predatory loan debts, student loan debts. Let's just really go out there and utilize these concepts and this education to put us ahead. That's what our main goal is. So, and we're also, I guess, with that said, I want to put it out there that we are looking for people that want to join our business, that want to do what we do. And that's kind of how we met. The person that I'm training to do this is from your area, and she said, "Hey, we should come see this," and that's what we did. So we are out there looking for folks to work with us as well.
Absolutely, man. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and talking about the services you provide. And I'm serious. I've listened to the presentation, and it was really moving, and I really like the vision and the work that you are doing. So those of you that are listening out there, man, hit up Jason, DreamCatcher Financial Strategies, and like he said, declare war against these finances. I mean, it's really important. It's powerful. It's powerful to see the presentation. And again, Jason, I appreciate you coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Peter, and to all your audience out there too. If they watched us, I really appreciate you watching all the way to the end. So I just appreciate everything that you do. I watched some of your videos as well, and the movement that you have going on, the crusade that you're on too, as far as financial literacy and pushing entrepreneurship. I just really appreciate people like yourself, and I appreciate you too as well, Peter. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, brother. Take care, and I'll let you know when this is all set to go.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.